Welcome to Association Newsmakers. Today, we're talking about negotiating contracts for association CEOs and senior staff with someone who's a real authority on that subject. Attorney Jeffrey Tenenbaum is a partner at Venable, where he chairs the law firm's nonprofit organizations practice group. He began his career in the nonprofit sector as manager of the legal section at the American Society of Association Executives, following several years on Capitol Hill as a legislative assistant. Welcome, Jeff, to Association Newsmakers.
Thank you, David, for having me.
Jeff, what are the current trends in employment contracts of association CEOs and senior executives, and what recent changes have you seen?
For one, I think we've seen more of a trend away from fringe benefits and perks and other things like that, and more focused on cash, both current compensation, bonuses, and deferred compensation and retirement. I think we've also seen more of a focus, I've personally seen more of a focus on retirement and deferred compensation and people thinking about the future and getting more creative. There are a wide variety of vehicles out there in terms of retirement and deferred compensation with pros and cons of each that can be utilized, but execs seem to be more interested in pursuing that as well.
And what tip would you offer someone looking to sign their first employment contract as an association CEO? And can you just go these days with a simple letter of understanding? Is that strong enough as a legal document for CEO engagement?
Whatever label you put on a document, like it's any kind of an agreement or a contract, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter what label is on there. What matters is what provisions in there are binding and what do the details say. So really the only question is what's going to be in there. And there are lots of different provisions that can be in association executive employment agreements. For me, what seems to be one of the most critical provisions for execs is to make sure that they have sole authority over the hiring, firing, promotion, demotion, and compensation of all of the other staff of the association, of course, within the confines of the budget that's approved by the board of directors. That's a very important provision. As many association execs know, there's a lot of micromanaging and meddling that can go on from board of directors, and one of the greatest protections that they can have is to have that very clearly stated in the employment contract, so there's no question about it.
And when a likely CEO candidate and a board hit a controversial item, how do you help people deal with that, or what advice do you give them?
Sometimes it's a question of with whom, who's doing the negotiation on both sides. Sometimes you'll see, attorneys are not always known for this, but sometimes they can be very difficult to work with, and sometimes you have a really difficult attorney representing the exec or the association. I'm on the other side of that, and it's just a complete pain in the neck to deal with. Sometimes it's a question of who's negotiating on behalf of the association on the volunteer leadership side. As you know, volunteer leaders typically change from year to year or every other year. Some are very easy to work with, some are not so easy. Some are coming from their own industries or professions where they get paid a lot less than Washington, D.C. based association executives get paid. So sometimes there's a real element of, why the hell should we pay this person this much money? How in the world can we justify this? And sometimes it takes a real education process, say if I'm representing the association, to educate them about what is fair market compensation. If you want to attract and keep talented people, you're going to need to pay for that. So sometimes it's an issue of who's negotiating on behalf of the association as well.
And any last words you would want to give to aspiring CEOs or CEOs looking at renegotiating their contracts on fair, solid contracts?
Particularly in these sorts of agreements, if it's too imbalanced one way or another, it usually doesn't work well in the long run. Another thing that I would say is that it's very important to establish through the contractual process a system that makes very clear that there's going to be good communication and transparency between the exec and the volunteer leadership on an ongoing basis. That from the exec's perspective, it's very important to make clear who is going to determine my bonus, who's going to determine how well I did at the end of the year, who's going to help set those benchmarks for my performance and bonuses and things like that. And then you want to have ongoing constant communication between the exec and the volunteer leadership, at least that core kind of centralized group of people who are the real decision makers in this regard. And in my experience, when you have that, regardless of how well or poorly the association's doing, it usually works much better for both parties.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next edition of Association Newsmakers.